Hello everybody. Today we're going to start looking at the next chapter in the textbook. It is the chapter that covers Protista and fungi. So let's open up to it. Chapter 8, Protists and fungi. We want to look at the opening pages to the chapter, of course, and the big idea is what are protists and fungi and how do they affect an environment. All right. There's this beautiful picture here of this green and red organism and the inquiry, plant or animal. These organisms are neither. Protists and fungi are two groups of living things that have characteristics similar to those of plants or animals. Things to think about. How is the organism pictured similar to a plant and to an animal? How might this organism benefit its environment? All right, if we move on to lesson 1, we can see that lesson 1 is called What Are Protists? And the reading guide here has the essential questions for the lesson. What are the different types of protists and how do they compare? Today we're just going to look at the first group of protists, the plant-like protists. How are protists beneficial? The vocabulary for the entire lesson includes protist, algae, diatom, protozoan, cilia, paramecium, amoeba, and pseudopod. Okay, we won't be getting to all those vocabulary words today. Like I said, we're just going to focus on the introduction and the plant-like protists. Look at this awesome picture. So it looks like a hand grabbing a piece of fruit or a ball or something like that. And the inquiry question, grabbing the snack. The protist group includes diverse organisms. What is the blue tinted organism doing in the photo? How is this organism similar to an animal? All right, and on the other side here on page 265, we have what are protists? And this describes some of the basic characteristics. Once again, explain it's not plants, it's not animals. Kingdom Protista is a separate kingdom. Okay, so remember the first two kingdoms are archaea and bacteria, and now we're up to Kingdom Protista. Okay, besides the appearance of Protista, organisms can be classified by structures in their cells. For example, a plant cell has a cell wall made of cellulose and a membrane made of flexible fats. A plant cell often contains chloroplast organelles that carry out photosynthesis. An animal cell also has a membrane made of flexible fats, but does not contain chloroplast or have a cell wall. These characteristics make it easy to identify both types of cell. However, some organisms, such as the protist shown in Figure 1, cannot be classified easily. Figure 1 says many photosynthetic algae look like plants, and you can see this kelp, famous off the west coast of the United States, kelp forest. Most people would think that this is a plant, but it is classified in Kingdom Protista. We're going to find out that Kingdom Protista is very diverse and sort of in many ways like the leftovers of organisms that didn't fit into any of the other kingdoms. The textbook defines a protist is a member of a group of eukaryotic organisms which have a membrane-bound nucleus. So this is our first kingdom where we are looking at eukaryotic cells making up eukaryotic organisms. Remember, archaea and bacteria are prokaryotic. Members of the protist group share some characteristics with plants, animals, and also with a kingdom known as fungi, which we will get to later in this chapter. However, they are not classified as any of these groups. Okay, let's mention very quickly the reproduction of protists. Most protists reproduce asexually, and we've already spoken about that. And some protists can also reproduce sexually. Remember, asexually, you have the genetic input from one parent, and sexual reproduction, you have two sources of genetic material. How are protists classified? Scientists usually classify organisms according to their similarities. However, protists are unique and diverse. Typically, a protist is a eukaryote that cannot be classified as a plant, animal, or fungus like we said before. But we do group them and classify them. If we look at this nice table here, in three groups. Are they more like plants? Are they more like animals? Or are they more like fungus? And sometimes they seem like they're 50-50, where they seem very much plant-like and very much animal-like. So we're going to have to read carefully to see how they are classified. Plant-like protists. You might have seen brown, green, or red seaweed at the beach or at the aquarium. That seaweed is algae. Algae are plant-like protists that produce, hello Trixie, produce food through photosynthesis using light, energy, and carbon dioxide. Most plant-like protists, however, are much smaller than the multicellular algae shown in Table 1. Okay, another group of protists that are a little bit different but also plant-like are diatoms. Look at the picture of the diatoms here. Okay, the diatoms are very common and they're found in seawater, and they're used throughout the world to make colored glass, and they also make the reflective lines in the streets. So you can see the lanes at nighttime. They reflect the light from the headlights. Also, they're used to filter food, and they're used in many, many places. Dinoflagellates, this plant-like protist right here, it's unicellular also, like the diatoms, and it spins and turns. This is a euglena. Euglenoids are really cool because they carry out photosynthesis, but they also have this flagellum, and they can move, just like the dinoflagellates spin with the flagellum. The euglena can use the flagellum to move it towards light sources to carry out photosynthesis. All right, in the last two pages in the textbook about plant-like protists, we get into more depth into algae, where it reminds us that they're photosynthetic. This really cool one down here is actually Volvox, and it's unicellular colony that forms a sphere. It's really, really cool. And then the last page talks about the importance of algae. And algae is a really big food source for not only for people, but for all sorts of other animals and organisms. But algae can also be used in toothpaste, in making lotions and fertilizer for growing crops, and like I mentioned, in filters with the diatoms. So it's a very important part here of an ecosystem. And here's a really cool picture of a kelp forest off the coast of California, presumably. The California state fish right here. Kelp can grow many, many centimeters per day. And they provide these really awesome, densely populated, basically kelp forests that provide habitat for lots of different organisms. Sometimes algae can be a little bit of a problem when there's a lot of food source, like from fertilizers and other types of pollution. It allows the algae to grow out of control, and it overpopulates. And this is called an algae bloom, and it's really, really bad for the organisms that live in that particular body of water. You can see when we turn the page on 270, we get to start to talk about the animal-like protists, and Trixie says that's a wrap, and we'll talk about those more tomorrow.